Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. It's lovely to see you all. Some familiar faces, which is great. Really nice to see you, and some new people, I think, is joining us as well. So that's brilliant. Appreciate you taking your time out of what is usually a pretty busy midweek to join me. And I've got my colleagues Ed and Aisha along with me as well from the Entrepreneurship and Innovation Group. Just maybe wait another moment while a few more people come in. Hope first few days of the second semester are treating you well. The first few weeks of the 2022 are treating you well. I think this is our first maybe innovation skills of the year, but we've got a few more coming up. And just while waiting for some others to join us, we have a innovation masterclass on the 31st of January as well, which we can send you details about if you'd like to join that. So for those of you that don't know me, my name's Chris Moore. I'm the head of Entrepreneurship and Innovation. I've been at the university for nearly 12 years now. And there's a picture of me doing my TED talk, shameless plug for my TEDx talk that I did in Aberdeen. But yeah, my role in the university is really to kind of stimulate and foster innovation and entrepreneurship amongst our communities. So our communities of students, our communities and staff, and our alumni. And more we're working with the region as well as we try to build kind of entrepreneurial resilient businesses out in the region in different sectors. So that's something that we've been very actively doing just now. And I guess one of the things I wanted to just quickly shine a light on is a lot of the people in the room that are joining us today have the skills and have the spirit, the entrepreneurial spirit. And maybe what they don't have is the understanding of how to make a difference. And that's kind of what I want to share with you in the next 45 minutes. So this is the top 10 skills of 2025 that was set out by the World Economic Forum. And, I think a number of you in the audience today will you'll look through those skills list, and you'll recognize that you have a lot of them. And so you have those skills to be a great pirate, and you have the spirit to be an amazing Jack Sparrow, and to be an innovator, and to help build a culture of innovation in our own organizations, whether that's the one that we're currently working in. So mine would be RGU, and I see some RGU colleagues today on the call. But whether you're going into a company, so when you graduate, when you go into a company that you may be joining when you leave university, there's a number of elements that we need to consider, a number of tools and techniques and frameworks that can help us on our journeys to be innovators in organizations. And that's really what this skills session is about. Because there's probably nothing harder in business than trying to innovate inside an organization, particularly large organizations. When you start up a company, enemies and competitors are usually outside the business. Innovators within larger companies often have enemies and competitors inside their own company as well. And so large companies are often faced with this paradox. They know they have to innovate for the future while running the core business that they have. And it's the management of the core business that tends to get in the way of people who want to innovate or get in the way of innovation. And yet, as in RGU and as in a lot of large corporations that you all know, there's a lot of innovative and entrepreneurial employees who are constantly trying to innovate. And although they can be viewed by some as kind of disruptive rebel pirates, those innovators can see the future coming. They're passionate about it, and they're passionate about the companies they work for. They want to ensure that they survive. And I'm going to use this word, intrapreneurs. So intrapreneurs are people, inside. They're a term given to the innovators inside a large company. These, pirates, I'm calling them, if you like, who are very passionate about it. But most intrapreneurs recognize that they can't keep doing innovation as a series of one-off projects. And because they often have to jump through a number of hurdles in large organizations to do that. And they realize actually that there's a need for some change inside their companies to allow that innovation to happen often and as a repeatable process. And what I want to talk to you about, how do we get that done? How do we go about getting that done? Because innovation often remains outside the prevailing system. It struggles because it remains outside the prevailing system. You have an innovation lab or an R&D department, and it usually sits on the periphery of an organization. And innovation constantly challenges against the dominant mindset in organizations, which is that they're measured to drive efficiency and effectiveness on the day job, what it is that they're doing. And they reward and focus on short-term performance. That's what their role's about. That's what their reward's about. That's what their advancement strategy is about. And so this kind of idea of innovation, it sits outside their domain of focus. And that's what Steve Jobs was talking about when he said it's more fun to be a pirate than join the Navy. And so before we jump into this, let's highlight some 4 innovation myths that stop people like yourselves and leaders from turning their ideas into real products, real services, real processes, departments, organizations. Because these myths permeate organizations and the senior management teams, and they stop you and I from turning these ideas into these real products, processes, and services and business models. The exploration journey calls innovation leaders to adapt ideas iteratively and constantly test and adapt until you've got that sufficient evidence through things like the value proposition that customers actually care about and they really want the product and service that you have. And early on, no one knows whether or not your ideas are going to work. And so we need to invest small amounts of time, small amounts of money in it, because we want to look for evidence to support that those are coming through are going to be successful. And we'll see later when I talk about exploration and exploitation that they're very radically different, and they require a different set of skills, different cultures, because explorers and innovators and pirates have to deal with high levels of uncertainty, whereas the people that are the exploiters need to deal with things like project management, KPI, budgets. And we all know what different skills people have, and we know those people that are great at exploitation, and we also know those people who can live with uncertainty and with failure, and that can be those pirates and those explorers in the organization. And one of the challenges that innovators need to be seen as partners who are essential to the future of the organization. And they also need to be given the space to be able to do it. They need to be given space in the strategy, space in the structure, space in the finances, and sometimes physical space as well, where people can go and they can collaborate and have these discussions that's kind of in a safe space that's beyond the organization. And most successful organizations that we know are adept at constantly evolving their current offerings. But they often falter when it comes to pioneering radically new products and services. Let's think about something. Let's think about Kodak, Blockbuster, BHS. BHS was 88 years on UK's high streets, and then they shut their doors in August of 2016. And for many who remember BHS and have shopped in BHS, I certainly did when I was a child, with my mum and my grandparents. It was a sad occasion. A lot of people lost their jobs, so lots of former employees, wondered where this kind of black hole had gone. But in reality, BHS failed to adapt to changes in the retail business environment, whereas places like Debenhams, Next, maybe House of Fraser was slightly more agile to adopt those changes. And I think, as we look at the story of corporations that are failing to adapt and sometimes collapsing, we're hearing that more and more often, particularly in the retail business as well. And the former CEO of Nokia actually said it's sometimes difficult in big successful organizations to have the sense of urgency and hunger in the marketplace. They rest on their laurels. And a key question in all these conversations is whether large companies can innovate like startups can. And so we've got a conundrum that established companies simply lack that flexibility to explore new territory. And so that brings us nicely back to Steve Jobs and the quote, faced with a choice of starting your own company or joining a large corporation, Steve Jobs thought that it was more fun to be a pirate than to join the Navy. And I think Jobs was probably right, but I'm also equally convinced that it is possible for entrepreneurs to be pirates within a Navy, because large companies can, and when you join them, and we work in a fairly large organization, RGU, be just as innovative as startups. But in order to do so, we have to be aware of this paradox, which we call the innovation dilemma, where established companies need to be aware that they're not startups, and they're not even striving to be a startup. But like startups could focus on a single mission and proceed with one idea. Yeah. Whereas large companies have to get a handle on a myriad of competing concerns and paradoxes. And so how can our organizations, or the organizations that we're going to join, focus on driving that continuous innovation and driving positive change? And so here are some of the struggles and reflections that we need to consider. The first one is innovators, and hopefully most of the people in this workshop are innovator. I like to think I'm an innovator. I certainly know that Edward and Aisha are as well, and I see other people here that I think I would call innovators. Are often impatient. We want things to happen now. We get fed up quickly. We want to execute stuff and move on. But this stuff, certainly in terms of culture, just doesn't happen overnight. You can't just jump straight in. Can't just start anywhere. We need to choose the right place to start. And we also need to understand what our goal is. What is it that we're trying to achieve? And one of the things that I would suggest we are trying to achieve is that we want to make innovation a legitimate and respected part of an organization's structures, processes, and behaviors, so that it can have an enduring and lasting impact. And we can also embed it so that it's repeatable. It's not just one-off. It's not just this, what we know as innovation theatre. We're not just sticking things up on a wall and just running a number of different sort of bespoke activities. It needs to embed in the organization and permeate the culture throughout the whole organization. And to do this, we need to go on a journey. And this is the journey of the pirate in the Navy. Because that's what pirates do. They go exploring, they go on a journey. And so what does that journey look like? Well, the first thing we need to do is we need a deep understanding of the organization or the department, because this might be at department level, or the company. And we need to think about the context that we're working in. And a question that you would ask yourself is this organization ready for innovation? And there's three elements to consider there. One is leadership. Is leadership support for innovation visible? Is it explicit? Are they providing the space and the resources? Is it in the strategy? Is someone responsible for innovation working on the executive team or working in senior management who has a responsibility for innovation? The second thing is organizational design. How can we best design our organizations to support innovation and remove the blockages? So, for example, what are the reward structures like? Are people in the organization being rewarded for their innovative thinking and their entrepreneurship? Do we incentivize innovation across all levels, not just senior management and middle management, but across all levels? And then do tools exist to support innovation? So innovation practice. So things like lean methodologies for startups, design thinking. Is there availability for prototyping and testing and iterating? And if there are they adopted widely, or do they just sit in one department or one domain or one school? And to help us learn from those, we need to go and speak to people that have stories, because people would have done this before in your organizations. And we need to go and ask them the stories. Many of them will have war stories. They'll have scars. There will be many wannabe pirates who have traveled these waters, and they'll know the traps. They'll know the bureaucracy. They'll know where the sharks are swimming, and maybe where some of that treasure can be found. So we need to go and seek these people out, because we're not alone in trying to make this happen. And you need to work with these people. And what you may do by talking to these people is you may reignite some kind of latent enthusiasm for people that have walked this path before, gain their trust and commitment, and get them on board for this cause. The next part of the journey is that we need to build relationships. You need to build relationships with the executive team, the top lady, the top man. They may love you. They may love your idea of innovation, but in many cases, it's only 10% of the story. They may be the boss, but they're not running the company. They're not the people on the ground that are running the company. So I would argue that the middle managers in organizations are the crucial level that you need to get to. And usually in middle managers, some of them will love it. Some of them will try and stifle it. And the reason for that is most are incentivized by core operational performance. It's nothing against you, but most of them aren't innovating. Most of them just want to get through the day and get home. And some, and we know who they are in our organizations, um, will frustrate you. These people are adept at frustrating people's attempts to innovate. And maybe it's because jealousy, or maybe it's just not their bag, and that's fine. So we need to build relationships throughout our discovery process, and we want to find fellow pirates to join our pirate band. And a way of doing that is to listen carefully to what they have to say, listen to what their pains are, what's keeping people awake at nights, and build alliances around them. Be very open-minded. We all have biases. So, go into those conversations with an open mind, and don't let your own biases influence you. And be honest about who you are, what it is you're trying to do, and what you have learned from speaking to people and building those relationships. And then look for those early adopters. Who are those fellow pirates who are going to join you on this voyage? Because they're out there in these organizations, in these departments, and they're people who are very similar to you, think like you, and very passionate and want to make change in the organization. Find who they are and look for them and get them on board early. And then sit back, reflect. What have we learned from that initial context? Because there's usually a lot going on in organizations and departments. And maybe the organization is not designed for innovation. Maybe there's misalignment between departments and sections and products and services. So what can we all do? So as innovators and as pirates, I would suggest that we resist the urge for the big bang project, what I call the big bang project. Start small. As I said, we're impatient. We want the company and the departments to change straight away and suddenly be, all innovators, have lots of events and workshops and launch new products and advocate lots of change processes and lots of consultations, have away days. When we do that, what we do is we get very little impact. Again, it's what we call innovation theater. It's very little impact, lots of activity without lots of impact. And transforming an organization's innovation culture, many of which are very complex, takes time and patience. Organizations, departments, living organic things made up of people. And then the people aren't going to automatically bend to your will, however charismatic you are, or however much of a salesman you are, because they're not spending their time sitting around waiting for you to come up with your amazing innovation idea and lead them, lead their band of pirates. So what we need to do is we need to start small, and we need to start doing things that are going to have an impact. What is going to have an impact? We need to gain those early wins, and we need to gain and build credibility. Because the more goodwill that we can earn, we can spread stories like wildfire across the organization. And they have this sort of ripple effect. We can permeate the organization with these ideas. And you are going to have detractors. In every organization, every department, we have the people who are the naysayers. And we're going to learn very quickly that not everybody loves innovation. Some people will be negative or critical, and many people will just be apathetic. They actually won't care very much at all. And of course, it's human nature. But try and pay more attention to the negative news and distractors than we really should. Because people do that. Try not to do that. It's human nature that we always look at the negative things. My son comes home from his school report. He's got A's and B's, and then there's a D. We will naturally focus on the D. What went wrong with the D? Whereas actually what we should be doing is celebrating all the A's and B's that he got. But it's kind of human nature to do that. So when you come across those naysayers and those people, what can we do? We can run and hide. We can pick a fight, not advisable. Or what we can do is we can try and turn them into believers, turn them into allies, get them to join the pirate crew. And we do that by showing them the value that we're creating and how they can have a role in it, what expertise and experience they can bring to having a role in it. How can they contribute and get them to be part of that pirate journey. So, I wouldn't run and hide, I wouldn't pick a fight, but maybe try and win them over and get them to see the value of what it is that you're doing and how it can impact on their role and their jobs. And as I said before, we want to start with those early adopters. Let's find those group of a dozen people, 20, 30 people in the organization, in the department who are super keen to work with. Those are the people that are on your side. Many of them would have joined this masterclass, I imagine, because they're the early adopters, because they're interested in this activity. And so I think, I'm talking to an audience that are probably those people. They're people that you can trust, and they're people that can forgive you when things go wrong, but they can cheer you on when things go right as well in an organization. They're often the ones that see huge value in the innovation journey. And they're people who may have a problem that this innovation can help solve, so that it helps them to sleep at night. So, for example, it might be the marketing department who want to introduce a new chatbot for their frequently asked questions. It might be a finance department who want to develop some automation for expense accounts. It could be the legal department who want to introduce some artificial intelligence to recognize and scan kind of contracts that they're working with, to save them time, save them money, save them energy. And a key part of what it is that we're trying to do is we're trying to change the hearts and minds when we talk to people that are considered to be our early adopters. But talk is cheap. Talk is cheap, and without action, talk is cheap. Lots of entrepreneurs and intrapreneurs and pirates in the Navy can't stop pontificating. I guess it's kind of what I'm doing now. I'm pontificating, talking endlessly for hours and hours about innovation this and innovation that. You have to do the work. And I'm very proud in RGU, the Entrepreneurship and Innovation Group, have executed. We've done the work and we continue to do the work. There's no getting away from it. It's all about the execution. So innovators must be able to execute and not get distracted, and agree upon what you need to achieve and by when. And we work with early adopters, and we ask them about their challenges that they're facing. We keep them awake at night, and we see how we can help and improve them. But we execute, because we need to move the needle by making other people in the organization believe in us. So it's all about the execution. It doesn't have to be wild and disruptive. We don't need to be the next Netflix, or we don't need to be the next iTunes, but we do need to see some incremental improvements along the way. And then as we get these early wins and early successes, we craft great stories. We need to be great storytellers. Before we had little credibility. Once we get a couple of wins, we get some good credibility, and it builds as we get that win. And that perception that people had about you and your little innovation team and your innovation ideas becomes reality. And those skeptics start to become believers. They start to understand the value of those intangible concepts, and that the ideas which were previously difficult to understand become reality. And then we create that buzz, we create that excitement across the university, across the organization, which one is the university, and that fans the flames of that new innovation. And of course, there'll still be the naysayers and the distractors. They might come after you. So stay humble, have some humility, and remain focused on your goal. Because we don't want to be a pirate that does a lot of thinking without results. We have to be able to execute, because there's too many people that would have gone before you who have gone on to kind of walk the plank or been hit by a cannonball, and haven't got there. So it's really important that we aren't just talking about it, that we're being seen to execute and do things with action. So let's just arc back a little bit to our goal. And our goal was to make innovation legitimate and respected part of an organization's structures and processes, that it has an enduring and lasting impact on the organization, and that we embed it as a repeatable process that kind of permeates the culture across the university. And I want to introduce a framework that has been developed that can help us out to do that, particularly when faced with the innovator's dilemma. How can organizations innovate for tomorrow while managing the really important operation of today's world? The profit that they need, the staff that they need. And what you can see is that leaders in organizations often want to know how they can build an environment to allow that innovation to thrive. And in order to do that, we need to realize that business activities actually sit on what's known as an uncertainty continuum. And this has been developed by a strategizer, and it's called the explore-exploit continuum. and that creating new growth engines in your companies and managing existing businesses are opposite sides of that continuum. And if we understand that, that's going to help executives and innovation teams put in place the right investments, the right processes, and the required skill sets and cultures to be able to explore new innovative ideas and exploit the current ones that they have. Because these two things kind of need separation. And so organizations need that ambidextrous design. They separate new exploration units from the more traditional exploitative ones, allowing for different processes and structures and cultures to emerge. And it's the senior management that has to be the linchpin, the linking pin between the two of those. And that way they can, have pioneer breakthroughs or even disruptive innovations, which allow those incremental gains to be considered. Let me just talk a little bit more about culture, because for organizations that want to have both the explore culture, where we're cultivating discovery and accelerating new ideas, and the exploit culture, which is about management, it's about systems, it's about KPIs, it's about budgets. If they're going to come under one roof, then we need to create, manage, and harmonize two completely different cultures. And, they're quite antagonistic towards each other, really. Executive teams cherish that operational excellence, the planning, the constant improvements when managing the present day activities of the business. Yet, they know they can't just cost cut themselves into the future. So they kind of have to simultaneously embrace a culture of experimentation, learning to fail, learning to adapt when exploring new ideas. And the ones that fail to do that eventually come unstuck. That's the Kodaks, that's the Nokias, that's the BHSs, that's the Woolworths, that's the Blockbusters. And so they find it difficult to survive in the future if they don't have those kind of cultures. And so this is the explore, exploit framework for innovation. And they separate them into two units, but they are connected. So this is what I kind of talk about, an ambidextrous design, because they're constantly pursuing incremental innovations, small improvements in existing products and operations that will let them operate more effectively and deliver even greater value to their customers. And it's an excellent framework for managing this paradox that I've been talking about. So the explore is about searching for new ideas, new products, new services, new value propositions, new business models, new departments to ensure that the organization has a robust future. Whereas the exploit model is really, centers on keeping existing organizations or business models on a growth journey, scaling emerging ideas and products and services, improving returns and improving value through minimizing disruption and risk. So let me just go into a little bit more depth about this. At the core of innovation is the need to turn ideas into value propositions that customers care about. And innovation is really about making informed decisions, often on incomplete evidence. We don't know everything, so we have to get that evidence. And exploration requires a number of small bets. These orange dots are ideas, they're products, they're kind of small bets that we're having, if you like. And what we're trying to do is reduce them over time and focus on 2 or 3 based on evidence that we continually acquire. So let me explain the model. On the y-axis, you have expected return to the department, to the company. It could be the financial impact if it's successful. It could be, you could measure that in terms of profitability, in terms of margins, in terms of growth, in terms of revenue potential. It's the impact of the idea on the organization, on the department. And that can be measured in lots of different ways. So let's say we were looking at a healthcare organization. That potential return could be waiting times, it could be number of beds, it could be staff retention. What is it that you want to measure the success of? In education, it might be student experience or the number of students coming to the university. In business and commercial, it might be something about profit margin, maybe carbon reduction, net zero, staff satisfaction, or you may want to focus on environmental returns or social returns. So it's the return of investment of the idea on the y-axis. On the x-axis is innovation risk. And this is really looking at desirability, feasibility, viability, and adaptability. And what we're trying to do is over time reduce the risk that this is going to, be a bad product, or no one's going to want it, or we can't build it or make it, or it's not feasible or commercially viable. So desirability, customers need to be interested. If the market's too small, if there are too few customers, or the organization can't reach those customers, then it's going to be high risk. Viability, can we deliver the service? Can we deliver the product? Are the costs too high? Is it generating enough revenue streams? Will the customers pay that cost? Feasibility, can we manage the scale? Can we get access to the key resources that we need, the key skills, the key technologies, the key activities, and the key partners? Because if we can't, it's not going to move up that trajectory very far. And adaptability, what happens when legislation comes in that makes it completely redundant? What's the technology, the macro environment? Is it favorable or not favorable? So these are all things that we will need to measure as we go along that. And as explorers, as pirates, we're gathering evidence to continuously plot those orange dots, those products, those ideas on this exploration journey to see where they sit. And there's a number of things, there's various actions that we can perform as we navigate this explore portfolio of ideas, products, services. And it involves shaping and testing ideas to improve them, because we want to try and get them up that trajectory, if you like. So we ideate, usually in the forms of workshops or idea suggestion boxes or accelerator programs, innovation challenges, which are a number of things that we do in the Entrepreneurship and Innovation Group. And at this stage, it's only assumptions that need to be validated. What we need to do then is get evidence so that the ideas can continuously move up. So based on that initial evidence, we then might want to persevere with the idea because we think it's feasible, desirable. And then we get to point B, and where we gain some insights after talking to customers and getting confidence from the evidence and the analysis that we've done, and further test the proposition. And then if it gets to point C, the decision there is that it's so high in the exploration phase that we would probably, we've got strong evidence of desirability, strong evidence of feasibility, viability, adaptability. And the challenge now is to find a good home for it. We're probably going to put it into the exploitation phase because, we can scale and execute it. It's a really good idea. It aligns to the organization. It brings high potential return, and it's low risk. So, that's where we're trying to get to point C so that we can then move it into the exploitation. At point D, sometimes ideas might need to pivot. They might need a significant change. So we learn evidence and we find out maybe there aren't enough customers, or the original design is too technically challenging, or the costs are too high of the idea. And so we might need to pivot. We might need to go back and review and take some earlier evidence, which may be irrelevant, and redesign the idea, the product, the service, whatever it is. And we may come to a stage where the idea is a promising one, but actually it might sit better outside the organization. It might not map directly onto the organization of what we're trying to do. It might not fit with the strategy. And here we might want to spin it out, transfer it to another organization, or the people that are really interested in the idea might want to go with it themselves and, start up their own company. The organization may want to invest in that company or that opportunity. And then sometimes when even a pivot doesn't make sense, you might just want to kill an idea, kill it kind of quickly. And that's what F is. It's retiring it. We talk about fail fast and move on, So the decision to kill an idea or a project or a product based on evidence and a lack of strategic fit. And the idea, it might be that there's too much risk involved, there's not high enough return. And remember, when you retire an idea and kill it quickly, you're saving time, you're saving money, you're saving resource, and you're saving, your own energy by killing an idea quickly that won't work because of the lack of evidence. So consider that when you're going through this process. So as you gather ideas, and remember, this is all potential. We haven't executed anything. This is all exploration just now. This is all us, being pirates and exploring ideas and products. As you gather evidence, you can plot them against the axis, and you can start to cluster what it is that you have. And just have a bit of a quicker look at those clusters. So first of all, we have niche opportunities. These are weak. There's no evidence that it's going to be desirable, feasible, viable. there's poor return, it lacks strategic alignment, and so you're going to be likely to discontinue these ideas pretty quickly. They are going to suck up time, energy, investment, money. So get rid of those pretty quickly. You then have things that I would call a promising concept. So these deliver good potential return. They're aligned to the organization's strategy, but there's no evidence of success. There's very little evidence that anybody wants it, that it's feasible, that it's desirable. And you can go and try and gather more evidence to try and see, or you can pivot. You can change it. You can, having those discussions, you could see what would be desired to get it back onto the right trajectory. But if there isn't, then bin it. Because although it might be good potential return, unless you can pivot it to get it more feasible, desirable, viable, adaptable, then it's not going to be a good use of your time. The next one are these safe plays. Now, these bring small potential returns, and they kind of align with the strategy, but not greatly. But people want them. There's strong evidence that it's desirable, that it's feasible, that it's commercially viable. So those scores are high. And if it's resource light, and it might bring in some funds, some regular, revenue to the organization, or, some regular impact, then there might be potential to take that forward. What you need to do there is you need to try and design it so that it's more aligned to the organizational strategy, but also that it can try and bring bit higher potential returns. So that's a safe play. And then, of course, the ones that we're looking for, these rising stars. These are ones that bring large potential returns, that have good strategic alignment to the organizational objectives, and there's strong evidence of success because people want it, it's viable, it's desirable. And these are the ones that we're looking to take into the next phase, which is exploitation phase. So let me turn now briefly, I'm just aware of time, to exploitation. So once we have robust evidence that it's desirable, people want it, that it's feasible, that it's viable, and it's adaptable, and we know that it aligns to the organization's strategy, has good potential return, we can then go and speak to executive team, and we have a story there to tell them about how it aligns, and people want it. So we have the evidence that we have designed a product, an idea, a model, a department that aligns to their strategy, and people want it. And so that's when it becomes executed. That when it becomes reality, it moves into being hypothetical and potential into reality, because it's going to give those good potential returns, the profit, the customer satisfaction, and we move it. And what we want to do is we want to turn that potential that we've evidenced into a reality. But we also want to protect it from dying or being disrupted. And so there's a couple of things when it goes to the exploitation phase that could impact on the product, the idea. And I want to just dive a little bit deeper into that because they could be disastrous. So one is, for example, a company that competes on price alone is exposed to external competition and possibly, better business models. And there are, also very kind of large macroeconomic forces that can have an impact. So the pandemic, for example, or any sort of legal or technology changes in the marketplace can make our products and services redundant overnight. So what we're trying to do here is we're trying to protect and build a moat around our products and services as we move into the exploitation phase to ensure that return on investment, continues. But here we need skills like focus on planning, on implementation, focusing on monitoring the product and the idea, the service. And so we kind of need different skill sets. These aren't the pirates. These aren't the innovators. These are people that are good at KPIs, are good at project planning, are good at management, are good at budgets, and are good at that kind of execution. And before, we can look through 4 lenses that demonstrate the potential risks in the exploitation portfolio, and we can plot them against the axis. So rising and falling stars. So these are the new products and services that emerge that are small and early, and so they're vulnerable. They're vulnerable from being disrupted, and they need to be monitored very, very closely. They're vulnerable to dying quickly, they have low actual return to the organization. We then have these ones which we call stable contributors. They're small. They're providing small and regular returns to the organization, but they do have a certain moat of protection. It might be a key customer segment, it might be strong brand, or it might be, you might have a monopoly in this specific product, service, or you're very good, you deliver really good quality. So it's bringing those returns. And remember, this is in the real world now. We then have these, what we call risk engines. So these are growth engines. They're very profitable. They're bringing high returns to the organization and high value to the organization, but they are susceptible to dying quickly. They're susceptible to disruption from competitors. They're susceptible to regulation, and they need to be protected. And you need to be able to adapt very quickly. So they need to be agile so that we can adapt them quickly as environmental forces change. And then again, what we're all aiming for in this trajectory are these ones. These are the profit engines. They're significant drivers of return on investment, significant drivers of value and impact. They're effective, they're efficient, they're key profit centers, they're the profitable departments, the profitable products, the services, and they provide amazing customer value. And so they need to be protected. They're a solid base of protection. They have a moat around them that protects them from being disrupted or protects them from changes in the macro environment. And so we do this by continuously improving, continuously protecting and reinventing departments, businesses, products, services from declining, and refreshing them constantly so that we keep them moving up this exploitation trajectory. A final question, this is my final slide. The final question is one that arises for leaders in organizations, and it's how do you manage both? Now, you've got this explore culture, you've got this exploit culture under one roof, this ambidextrous organization. So how do you manage both? How do you manage the explore and exploit portfolio with an equal amount of strategic focus, resource, and energy? Because we've already seen they're different. They need different skills, they need different cultures, and the same practices that you use to exploit existing products can't be used to explore new ones. And again, one reason why companies fail to manage the balance is they very often don't have equal status in an organization. Many organizations exploring lacks that status. The pirates, the earlier innovators lack that status, and the exploit portfolio dominates. And that's not really a surprise to any of us, is it? Because most organizations are reactive. They work on day-to-day firefighting. They're trying to make money. They're trying to improve customer service. They're managing processes and procedures. They're selling stuff to survive and grow. But to adapt and survive in the long term, organizations are going to need to allocate sufficient resources, bandwidth, and budgets to the explore portfolio. And they need to empower the innovators in their organizations, the innovation leaders, to be able to influence the organization. And innovation needs to feature at the very top of organization, either as the CEO or a co-CEO or an executive reporting directly to the board who has responsibility for growth and innovation. Think about people like Steve Jobs at Apple or Jeff Bezos at Amazon. These are what you would call innovation CEOs. And the likes of Arcadis, they have a chief entrepreneur on the board, in the boardroom. And the role of chief entrepreneur or chief innovation officer, who along with a dedicated team is responsible for creating and managing that exploration phase to explore the future, while those traditional executives are looking after and taking care of the existing business and the day-to-day operation. Whereas the chief entrepreneur is someone who understands about balancing the today with inventing opportunities for tomorrow. And that brings legitimacy, it brings power, and it brings a bridge to the core in the organization. And that's it from me, folks. I hope you've found that interesting, enlightening, entertaining. I hope there are a few jump-off points that you can take with you as you become pirates in the Navy, as you become innovators in your organizations, or even go to start up your own business. The explore exploit methodology is by Strategizer. If you Google explore exploit Strategizer, there's a wealth of information about it. I think it's quite a new model. I think it's a great framework for organizations like RGU to consider their own innovation landscape, and how we manage innovation. I thank you so much for joining me for today. I don't know, what time is it? Let me just check the time. I don't know if we have any questions or there's anything in the chat, Ed. Maybe got 10 minutes, or we can finish 10 minutes early. That's kind of it from the slides. I maybe stop sharing my slides. But yes, I hope you've enjoyed that, and I hope that's given you an opportunity. And hopefully you are those early innovators, those kind of pirates, because as we try and continue to build a foundation on the work that we're doing in RGU, we are reaching out to those people that want to come on this journey with us. And as I say, hopefully there's been some jump off points that you can take away with you today. So thank you all for joining. Unless there's any questions, I hope to see you all in the future. Just a quick reminder about the few events that are coming up. Edward, do you want to jump in here and just tell people about the event, the masterclass on the 31st?
Of course, and thank you so much to Chris. So our next event coming up, we have how to be an entrepreneur to become future-proof with Steve McCready, who's CEO of The Lens. That takes place on Monday, the 31st of January from 5:30, live streaming to YouTube. You can ask questions. He's previously done a TED Talk. He's previously been Institute of Business Director of the Year. So if you are interested in how to become a better leader in your organization, that's definitely an interesting masterclass to come along to. We have more skills sessions coming up. We have one on storytelling, which Chris will be leading on in a few weeks' time. And we have intellectual property coming up soon, sales, and various others. So hopefully we will see you at another session sometime very soon. And thank you for coming along today.
Yeah, thanks ever so much, everyone. Have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.